I was 8 years old when I first understood how different my sister and I were in our parents' eyes. It was Christmas morning in our grand estate, the tree towering in the foyer draped in lights and crystal ornaments. My sister, I'll call her Evelyn, was 6, bouncing with excitement on the stairs, as our parents called us down to open gifts. Father, imposing in his tailored suit, even on a holiday, stood by the tree with a proud grin. Mother hovered beside him, eyes shining with anticipation for what they were about to give her favorite child. Father handed Evelyn a large box wrapped in gold paper and an extravagant bow. She tore into it, paper flying until a glint of metal caught the light. A pair of car keys lay in her small hands. Obviously, at 6, she was too young to drive, but the keys were symbolic. With a flourish, Father announced that outside in the driveway waited a child-sized electric car, a perfect miniature of a luxury sedan painted gleaming pink just for her. Evelyn squealed in delight. Mother laughed and clapped, showering my sister with praise like confetti. I clapped too because that's what I was supposed to do, forcing a smile even as a familiar weight settled in my chest. Then it was my turn. Father passed me a small box wrapped in plain red paper. I peeled it open carefully, conscious that everyone's attention had already shifted back to Evelyn, who was jingling her new keys in triumph. Inside the box, I found a pair of thick wool socks. I stared at them, willing myself not to show disappointment. "They'll keep your feet warm," Father said briskly. "Very practical, right?" Mother added, already, distracted by Evelyn tugging at her sleeve to go outside and test her new toy. Moments later, we all traipsed out to the snow-dusted driveway. There it was, Evelyn's shiny pink toy car with a big red bow on the hood. She clambered in and hit the pedal, and the little engine hummed as she began to circle the courtyard. Our parents beamed, calling out encouragement. "Look at our princess," Go Mother sang. I hung back by the doorway, the cold seeping through my thin pajamas and the unopened socks clutched in my hand. No one noticed that I hadn't even tried them on. They were all too busy marveling at Evelyn's miniature luxury ride. I remember the sting in my eyes as I fought back tears. I remember biting my tongue so hard I tasted blood just to keep any selfish words from escaping. I was used to swallowing disappointment by then, but that day it felt particularly bitter. That Christmas set the tone for every celebration that followed. The specifics changed. One year it was a pony for Evelyn's birthday, while I got a $20 bookstore gift card. Another year, she got a glittering diamond necklace as a graduation gift, while I received a pen and a pat on the back, but the message never did. Evelyn was the princess of the family, the treasured child who could do no wrong. And I was the afterthought, expected to be grateful for whatever I got, no matter how small. It wasn't just about the gifts. Our entire world revolved around Evelyn. We lived in wealth that most people could only dream of, a grand estate with manicured garden staff to tend to every need, but amid all that luxury, I felt invisible. Father's face would light up at the slightest accomplishment of hers, while my triumphs, academic honors, good grades, little things I hoped they'd be proud of, were met with distracted nods. Mother loved to brag about Evelyn to her friends, how talented she was, how beautiful, how accomplished. When it came to me, she would change the subject. I learned not to volunteer my achievements. It hurt less to be ignored outright than to receive a lukewarm, "That's nice, dear," before her attention darted back to my sister. If I ever dared to feel upset or jealous, I was swiftly corrected. "Don't be selfish. Be happy for your sister," Mother would warn me with a stern look, as if my yearning for equal love was a moral failing. I began to question myself. Was I truly selfish? Was wanting even a fraction of the affection they lavished on her asking too much? Guilt gnawed at me, and I tried to shove my resentment deep down where no one could see it, especially not me. So I played my part as the quiet, dutiful son. I studied hard and kept my head down. I cheered for Evelyn at her ballet recitals and horseback competitions, clapping from the back of the auditorium while our parents showered her with roses. When other kids at school whispered that Evelyn was spoiled, I defended her and took a punch or two for my trouble. She never thanked me or acknowledged that I'd been hurt because of her. She didn't need to, not with everyone else telling her she deserved the best. My parents never even heard about that fight. I knew better than to seek comfort from them. Each slight, each cold shoulder, each unreturned smile from my family was a small cut to my heart. One cut is easy to ignore, but 1,000 of them will bleed you dry. By the time I was a teenager, I was numb in so many ways. Numb, but not defeated. A part of me still held on to the hope that if I endured, if I achieved something truly remarkable on my own, I might one day earn my parents' genuine attention, or at least their respect. I had to believe that because the alternative was accepting that I simply wasn't loved the way Evelyn was, and I wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. I carry the image of that hopeful boy inside me even now. I can see him in my mind's eye wandering the ornate halls of our home trying to figure out what he did wrong, why he wasn't enough. This is the story of how that boy grew into a man shaped by years of quiet hurt and longing, and how eventually that man decided he'd had enough. Hope can be a stubborn thing. I clung to it through my teen years, a quiet belief that someday my parents might truly see me. But with each passing year, reality chipped away at that hope, revealing the truth in painful ways. At 16, Evelyn got everything she could dream of. Our parents threw her a birthday celebration so extravagant it could have been mistaken for a royal ball, complete with a brand new silver sports car, presented in the driveway with a giant bow. 2 months earlier, when I turned 18, there had been no grand party, no car, only a quiet dinner and a modest gift, a fountain pen engraved with my initials for your college essays, as Father put it. I smiled and thanked them, pretending it was exactly what I wanted. But watching Evelyn bask in the applause of her sweet 16 as our parents toasted her bright future, I felt that familiar sting deep in my chest. Not long after I graduated high school as valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to university, I hoped that achievement might finally earn their attention. At the awards ceremony, I searched the crowd for them before my speech, but they never showed. Later, I found out they'd been at Evelyn's riding competition instead. Mother gave me an expensive watch afterward as a congratulations gift and said, "We're so proud of you, dear," in a tone that felt more obligatory than warm. I forced a smile, murmured my thanks, and locked the hurt away. They dropped me off at college that fall with brief hugs and even briefer words of advice. "Study hard. Make us proud," Father said, already eager to get back on the road. I stood on the curb with my luggage and watched their car disappear, feeling more abandoned than excited. Meanwhile, back home, Evelyn was starting at a prestigious prep school, pampered at every turn. They hired top tutors for her, bought her every gadget she wanted, and promised her another new car the day she got her license. The contrast was impossible to ignore. I was sent off to fend for myself while she was cushioned by every luxury. During university, I juggled classes and part-time jobs to cover rent and meals. My scholarship handled tuition, but everything else was on me. I seldom went home for holidays. It was easier to stay on campus than return to that house and feel like a stranger. Phone calls were rare and brief. I'd share a good grade or a promotion in a campus club, and my parents would say a perfunctory "good job" before quickly pivoting to Evelyn's latest exploits. She'd been elected something, or traveled somewhere exotic, or been showered with some new gift. It always felt like I was giving reports from a life they barely acknowledged. while hers was the life that truly mattered. 4 years later, I graduated college with honors. My parents came to the commencement out of duty, shook my hand for a quick photo, and left town before I even took off my gown. That evening, I had a quiet celebration with a couple of friends at a pizzeria. We clinked plastic cups of soda, and I tried to pretend it was enough. But part of me was hollow with disappointment. I had worked so hard to get here, yet the people I wanted to impress the most couldn't be bothered to stick around. The next morning, as I packed the last of my things at the estate, Mother casually mentioned that it would be practical for me to find my own place soon, now that I'd be starting work. Father echoed the idea and added that I could give him a call if I needed a job referral. Though we both knew his firm had no place for me, I understood. I wasn't expected to stay. Congratulations, and now off you go. So I left. I moved into a cramped apartment in the city and started an entry-level job at a marketing company. It wasn't much, but it was a start I carved out all on my own. I never asked my parents for a penny. Pride and spite kept me afloat when money was tight and the loneliness crept in. Meanwhile, my sister soared through life on gilded wings. She graduated from her academy and went on to an elite university. When she mused about starting a fashion line, Father quietly set up a seed investment for her future. When her grades wavered, Mother hired private tutors to ensure she stayed on track. My sister vacationed in Europe and the Caribbean, her social media filled with pictures of luxury resorts, and captioned, "Thanks, Mom and Dad." I watched it all from the sidelines, nursing my quiet resentments and trying to convince myself it didn't hurt. But the breaking point finally came on Evelyn's 21st birthday. My parents hosted a gala in her honor at a downtown hotel and, perhaps out of obligation or to maintain appearances, they invited me. I almost didn't go. The thought of standing around in another crowd of admirers while my sister soaked up adulation made me feel ill. But some mix of duty and curiosity got the better of me, and I went anyway. The ballroom was opulent, all crystal and gold, packed with elegantly dressed guests. I slipped in unnoticed and kept to the edges, an awkward ghost amid the glittering crowd. At one point, a tipsy guest even mistook me for waitstaff and pressed an empty glass into my hand. My face burned as I set it on a tray and quietly stepped away. Toward the end of the night, Father clinked his glass for attention and began to toast my sister. He praised her tirelessly, her accomplishments, her charm, her bright future, to hearty applause. I lingered at the back, half hidden behind a pillar, already planning to leave as soon as the toast ended. But then Father, perhaps tipsy, added with a grin, "And let's not forget my son over there." A spotlight actually swung in my direction. I felt my entire body seize up. "There he is," Father proclaimed, raising his glass toward me, "our very own independent young man making his way in the world." A few people turned to look at me, some smiling politely, others puzzled as if they hadn't even realized I was present until that moment. I forced a thin, polite smile, not knowing what else to do. Father went on voice booming with that jovial tone he used when making a joke. We offered him a hand, but he said, "No thanks, I got this." Gotta admire the pride, eh? A scattering of laughter followed. To everyone else, it probably sounded like good-natured ribbing. To me, it felt like he had just stripped me naked in front of the crowd. My cheeks burned. I could see Evelyn beside him suppressing a little smirk, and Mother in the audience with a fixed, tight smile, as if everything were perfectly fine. My hands trembled. A hot flood of shame and anger rushed through me. I was being publicly patronized for the very struggles I'd borne in silence. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I was so close to finally speaking up. I could taste the bitter words on my tongue, words I'd held back for a lifetime. I wanted to shout that my pride was nothing more than survival, that I'd had no choice but to do it on my own because they'd never been there for me. I wanted to expose the ugly truth behind our perfect family portrait, but I didn't. Under my mother's stern gaze, I felt the fight drain out of me. I could almost hear her voice in my head, "Don't you dare ruin this." My jaw locked, and I swallowed hard, forcing back the blistering retort I yearned to give. The silence stretched on, awkward and suffocating. Everyone waited for me to respond or joke back, but I couldn't. Instead, I lifted my glass and a stiff little salute, gave a brittle excuse for a smile, and walked out of the ballroom without a word. No one followed me. As the doors closed behind me, the muffled sounds of music and laughter continued, as if nothing had happened. I barely remember the drive home. That night, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, shaking with a toxic mix of rage, shame, and sorrow. I had never felt so low or so utterly alone, and in that rock-bottom misery, something hardened inside me. I realized I had nothing left to lose. They had stripped away every last piece of my self-worth, and I was done begging for scraps of their love. If my family would never respect me, I would find a way to make them see me on my own terms. I was through being the victim of their story. From that night on, I vowed to take back control of my life, no matter the cost. I woke that next morning numb and empty. I eventually got out of bed and moved through my morning like a ghost, performing the basics without feeling. In the weeks after the gala, I drifted through my days in a daze. At the office, I functioned on autopilot, barely present. Inside, I was raw and teetering. The scene from my sister's party replayed in my head, on endless loop, my father's booming "proud of you" mockery, the polite laughter of strangers at my expense, my mother's warning eyes. I'd excuse myself to the restroom to quietly let out the tears or to clutch the sink and take heaving breaths whenever it became too much. Every day I choked on humiliation. I withdrew from everyone. A concerned friend left me a voicemail after hearing I'd left the party, looking upset. I never called back. What was I supposed to say? That I'd finally been broken? I couldn't handle the idea of anyone else's pity or questions. So I let the calls go unanswered and the texts pile up until eventually they stopped coming. I sank into isolation, the world outside my apartment fading to a distant hum. At night, my thoughts turned dangerously dark. I lay in bed conjuring fantasies of striking back. In my mind's eye, I shattered the facade of our happy family. I ruined the things they loved as thoroughly as they'd ruined me. These visions of vengeance, setting my sister's beloved car up in flames, were frightening yet perversely comforting. It was as if years of suppressed rage were demanding to be acknowledged, even if only in the private theater of my imagination. Morning always dragged me back to a bleak reality. By daylight, my vow to change my life felt like a cruel joke. I was one man with no influence, barely making rent. They were untouchable in their world of luxury. I felt utterly powerless. Autumn turned to winter. I spent Thanksgiving alone with a microwaved dinner, unwilling to see anyone. Now Christmas loomed, threatening to dredge up old hurts. I remembered all those childhood Christmases that left me feeling small and forgotten. I braced myself for more of the same. Sure enough, about a week before Christmas, a small package arrived from my parents. Inside was a pair of thick wool socks and a note, "Stay warm." Mom and Dad. I let out a bitter laugh. Nothing had changed. Even now, their token gesture was a pair of socks. It felt like a cruel joke. Then came Christmas Eve. Scrolling numbly through social media, I found out exactly what Evelyn got: a brand new pearl white convertible with a giant red bow on the hood. Photos showed her beaming at a luxury car dealership downtown, my father by her side signing papers, my mother hugging her. Evelyn's caption struck me like a blow. Early Christmas gift. Thank you, Daddy, feeling so blessed. My hands shook with rage. They had lavished her with a luxury car and all their love while sending me socks in the mail. The knife couldn't twist any deeper. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could unsee those images, but I couldn't. It was just more proof of where I stood on the outside, forgotten. I spent Christmas Day alone in darkness. The silence was absolute. No calls, no visits. The unopened socks lay on my counter, a mute reminder of my status. I stared at them and felt something inside me break. I was just so tired of hurting. That night, as a cold wind howled against the windows, I found myself teetering on the edge of an abyss. More than once, I thought about ending it all. It would have been so easy to just slip away and be done with the pain. They don't get to win. Not like this. That tiny spark of defiance refused to die. Petty or not, the thought of denying them that victory kept me breathing. Yet even as I chose to stay alive out of spite, I had no idea what to do next. I was a lone man with limited means. How could I possibly make a dent in the armor of people as protected as my parents or as pampered as my sister? I didn't have the answer, and that gnawed at me relentlessly. Desperate for any kind of outlet, I grabbed an old journal from my shelf late one night and began to write. I poured everything out onto those pages. Every injustice, every ounce of anger, every wish for things to be different. The pen scratched furiously across paper as years of pent-up emotion bled out in ink. By the time I stopped, my hand was cramped, and my eyes were burning with tears I hadn't even realized were falling. But strangely, I felt just a sliver more grounded. Seeing my pain laid bare on paper oddly steadied me. As I read over those pages of raw truth, one thought crystallized: there must be a way. A way to make them understand, to balance the scales even a little. I didn't know how yet, but for the first time I felt a grim purpose take shape. I would make them see me and feel a fraction of what I'd felt. I didn't have a concrete plan, but I had that need for justice to cling to. Whatever it took, I was going to make them look at me with something other than indifference. Little did I know, the first opportunity to put that resolve into action was already on its way to me. The old year was ending, and so I decided was the old me as well. The new year arrived with a grim, cold clarity. I had no grand plan for my revenge yet, but I had a direction. And sometimes that's all fate needs to intervene. In the first week of January, I found myself doing something I never would have imagined. A month earlier, I took a trip to the luxury car dealership where my sister had gotten her shiny new convertible. I told myself I was there to scout for any crack in their perfect facade, any opportunity. Pulling up in my beat-up car, I almost lost my nerve. The glass and chrome showroom exuded the opulence I'd always been shut out of. Through the window, I saw salespeople in sharp suits around gleaming cars. Just days ago, my sister had been here receiving her lavish gift. I nearly turned back, but forced myself forward. There must be a way, I insisted silently. Inside, I wandered the brightly lit showroom, feigning interest in the cars while feeling utterly out of place. My scuffed shoes squeaked on the glossy floor as I tried to blend in. I doubted anyone would recognize me, and nobody did. My heart thumped when I caught a glimpse of a white convertible on the showroom floor, still adorned with a festive red bow. I could almost see my sister in it, laughing behind the wheel. I swallowed hard against the bitterness. Near the sales offices, I overheard two salesmen talking. "Whitaker's thinking of retiring, maybe selling the place," one said. "If he can find a buyer," the other replied with a chuckle. They wandered off, but those words echoed in my head. The owner was looking to sell. My pulse pounded. The owner wanted to sell the dealership. A wild idea flickered through my mind. What if I bought it? It was absurd. I had nowhere near the money, but it refused to fade. Owning this dealership would give me a power my family would never see coming. I left without speaking to anyone else, but my head was buzzing the whole drive home. That night, I barely slept. Not from despair as before, but from a kind of feverish excitement. I combed the internet for any news on Whitaker Auto. My online digging that night confirmed Mr. Gerald Whitaker was quietly seeking a buyer for the dealership. The price would be astronomical, for me nearly impossible. But I couldn't shake the conviction that this was the path I needed. Over the next week, an iron determination took hold of me. By day, I continued at my marketing job, but every free moment and late night was devoted to figuring out how I, of all people, might pull off the impossible. I reached out to Mr. Whitaker, and to my surprise, he agreed to meet me after hours. On the day of our meeting, I showed up in my best and only suit, my palms sweating, but my resolve firm. Sitting in his modest office, surrounded by photos of the dealership's early days, I knew I had to convince this shrewd, tired-eyed man to take a chance on me. He was understandably skeptical. I was young and had no automotive background. I acknowledged that, but I laid out my vision, how I'd bring fresh energy and modern marketing to the dealership, how I'd drive sales up with new strategies. I presented a bold proposal, too. I would put every penny I had down, and if he was willing, pay the rest in installments out of the dealership's future profits. Essentially, I asked him to let me buy the business on trust and grit. He didn't laugh me out of the room. He listened. He asked sharp questions about my finances and experience. I answered as confidently as possible, emphasizing my management skills and determination. I never mentioned my family. I wanted him to see me as my own man, and I certainly didn't want him thinking I had any hidden safety net. After a long discussion, Mr. Whitaker gave a small nod. He admitted my offer was unusual, but he also admitted he was intrigued. "You've got guts," he said, giving me a firm handshake as he saw me out. "I'll think it over." He got back to me by week's end, and we entered negotiations. The following days were a blur of bank meetings, paperwork, and sleepless nights. By some mix of persistence and luck, it all came together. A few weeks later, we signed the papers, and Mr. Whitaker handed me the keys, literal and metaphorical, to Whitaker Auto. I stepped out into the lot as the new owner under hefty debt, but owner nonetheless of the very dealership that had witnessed my humiliation. The cool metal of the office keys in my hand proved it was real. For the first time, I held genuine power to shape the story on my terms. I sat in my old car in the empty lot and let out a laugh that turned into sobs of relief and triumph. I had never felt more alive. As the showroom lights went dark, I savored this turning point. In a matter of weeks, I had turned my desperation into bold action. The boy who once meekly accepted socks while his sister got the world was gone. In his place stood a man with a plan to even the score. The stage was set. Now it was time to prepare for the performance I'd been waiting for, my revenge. Owning the dealership was empowering, but it was only a means to an end. I hadn't forgotten why I'd seized this opportunity. In the quiet of my new office at Whitaker Auto, which I deliberately kept the same name for, now I began to methodically lay out the pieces of my revenge plan. The first order of business was to confirm the details of my sister's car purchase. It didn't take long for me to locate the sales contract for a pearl-white convertible purchased 2 days before Christmas under my father's name with Evelyn as co-borrower. The financing had been done directly through the dealership. Effectively, the loan was now owed to me. I felt a dark thrill reading over the agreement. It was a standard contract, filled with legal jargon about payment schedules, interest rates, and clauses for default. I wasn't interested in the money. Not really. What I was interested in were the clauses that might allow me to call in the loan or cancel it. And there it was, buried on page 3, a clause stating the loan could be demanded in full or revoked if any information on the application was found to be false, or if the lender, the dealership, had reasonable cause to suspect the borrower might not fulfill the terms. A slow grin spread across my face. People like my father rarely fill out paperwork themselves. They have assistants do it, and they rarely do so carefully. I combed through the application and found exactly what I hoped: a lie about Evelyn's income likely added to help her qualify as co-borrower. Under the strict letter of the contract, that little falsehood was grounds for revoking the loan. I probably could have called in the loan without any excuse at all, but I wanted it to be by the book. They had bent the rules to get her that car. I was simply going to enforce them. I could have sprung the trap immediately, but I craved poetic justice. For once, their precious Christmas would be tainted by the kind of misery I'd felt. I decided to wait and strike during the holidays. For once, they would feel distress on a day they held dear. Quietly, I had our finance department draft a certified letter invoking that clause on Christmas Eve. The letter signed by me demanded full payment of the remaining balance within 48 hours due to discrepancies in the application, or else the vehicle would be repossessed. I knew my father wouldn't be able to muster that kind of cash on such short notice without panic, and the timing over Christmas would make it all the more agonizing. One manager in the finance office raised a brow at the sudden call-in, but I gave a curt explanation about policy changes and left it at that. By Christmas Eve morning, that letter was on its way to my parents' address. I had no intention of relying on mail for the grand reveal, though. I planned to deliver the news personally. In the trunk of my car sat a folder with copies of the loan contract and the demand letter neatly prepared like a gift. I had even arranged for a tow truck to wait on standby a few blocks away. Money can buy a lot of cooperation even on Christmas Eve. As I turned down the long tree-lined drive to my parents' estate, I found myself smiling, heart-thudding with a mix of nerves and anticipation. Last Christmas, I'd fled from here humiliated. This Christmas, I was arriving as the instrument of their reckoning. The mansion came into view, every window aglow with warm light and opulent decor. Once that sight filled me with hurt and longing. Today it fueled my sense of vindication. My footsteps crunched on the frosty path. This was it. Every indignity I'd suffered led to this moment. After a moment, the grand front door opened. My father stood there in a festive sweater, eyes widening in disbelief at the sight of me. For a moment he simply stared, as if seeing a ghost from the past. "Hello, Dad," I said calmly, a thin smile on my lips. "Remember me? I'm here to talk about the car you bought Evelyn." My father recovered from his shock quickly, his face hardening into a scowl. "What is this about?" He snapped, low and tense. Behind him I noticed my mother and sister hovering at the edge of the grand foyer, drawn by the sound of my voice. Evelyn's smile, from whatever celebration had been happening, was already fading into confusion. I stepped over the threshold into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. The familiar scent of pine from their enormous Christmas tree hung in the air. I had stood here so many times invisible amid their joy, but not tonight. "It's about Evelyn's Christmas present," I replied, loud enough for my mother and sister to hear clearly. I held up my folder, specifically the car. "I'm here in an official capacity, you might say." Father's eyes flicked to the folder and back to my face. He bristled at my tone and the fact that I'd walked right in. If this is some kind of joke, he started stepping forward as if to force me back out. No joke, I cut him off, pulling out the top document. It was the demand letter on Whitaker Auto letterhead with my signature at the bottom. I could feel a tremor of adrenaline in my limbs, but my voice came out cold and clear. I'm here as the owner of Whitaker Auto to inform you that your financing on Evelyn's convertible has been revoked. I paused, savoring the moment of pure bewilderment that passed over his features. Behind him, my mother gasped softly, and Evelyn frowned as if she didn't understand the words I'd said. Father blinked. Owner of... What the devil are you talking about? He was flustered, something I'd rarely seen. He glanced back at Mother, who was now at his elbow. Is this some kind of stunt? Did you come here to cause trouble on Christmas Eve? I let out a short laugh. Trouble? No, I'm here to settle accounts. I tapped the letter with one finger. As of this afternoon, the remaining balance on Evelyn's car is due in full, payable immediately. Otherwise, we'll be repossessing the vehicle. I delivered the line with practiced professionalism, but I couldn't keep a slight curl of satisfaction from my lips. Repossessing. Evelyn finally spoke, stepping forward. She was dressed to the nines in a glittering holiday party, dress a champagne flute still clutched in one hand. She looked between me and the letter, her face a portrait of disbelief. You can't be serious. Oh, I am, I said, meeting my sister's wide eyes. You see, dear sister, the dealership that sold you that car, my dealership, doesn't take kindly to fraud on loan applications. Mother found her voice next. Fraud. What fraud? What is he talking about? She placed a hand on Father's arm as if to calm him, though I could see her own hand was shaking. I flipped open the folder and pulled out a copy of the financing application. Shall we review? According to this, Evelyn here earns an annual income of $85,000 as a consultant. I lifted my gaze to stare directly at my mother. We all know that's nonsense. Evelyn's a full-time student with no such job. I turned to Father. You lied on the paperwork. Father's cheeks mottled red. Now see here, he sputtered. That's a clerical detail. It's a false statement on a credit application. I interjected sharply, which is grounds for revoking the loan. I stepped forward and placed the papers into Father's hand. He gripped them reflexively. In other words, I have every legal right to demand you pay off that car immediately, or have it repossessed, and I am exercising that right. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the crackling of the fireplace in the next room and the tinkling notes of a distant holiday song playing on their sound system. My parents and sister stood in stunned silence, processing the reality that I wasn't bluffing. Evelyn was the first to burst. You can't do this, she cried, stepping forward. Spots of angry color bloomed on her elegant, made-up face. That's my car. You absolute freak, you can't just take it. I had anticipated her fury, and in fact I welcomed it. I wanted all their masks to fall. I can and I will, I answered, my own voice rising. Years of bitterness sharpened my tone. Did you really think your car was immune to the rules? That just because Daddy got it for you, you'd never have to worry about consequences? Mother drew herself up, finally finding a shard of her matronly authority. This is outrageous. We did nothing wrong. The financing was approved. We've made every payment on time. Until now, I cut in, shooting her a hard look. It's approved by me now, and I've chosen to call it due. Consider it the cost of doing business under false pretenses. I saw Mother's eyes flit to my father, her lips pressed together in disapproval. Whether at Father's crassness or my presence, it was hard to tell. Father's initial shock was fast transforming into towering anger. How dare you speak to us like this? He seethed, voice low and dangerous, the same tone that used to cow me as a child. "You ungrateful little shit. Stop this now or you'll regret it." Or what, I challenged, my heart thudding. I felt a heady mix of fear and liberation. He could no longer strike me where it hurt. I had taken everything they once held over me and turned it to kindling. "You'll cut me off. You'll yell at me in front of your guests." I gestured vaguely toward the living room, where indeed the party had gone silent, and guests were peering our way. It seemed the Christmas celebration had ground to a halt as people realized something was amiss. Good. Let them hear. My father's nostrils flared. He was not used to being challenged, certainly not by me. "I will have your hide for this," he growled. "I don't care what legal documents you think you have. I will not let you embarrass this family and ruin our holiday. Now get out of my house." He moved as if to grab my shoulder, but I sidestepped, raising my voice further. "Go ahead, throw me out. It won't change the facts." I shouted, allowing years of pent-up emotion to break free. My voice rang through the hall. I'm certain the entire gathering in the next room heard every word. The fact that I finally have something you care about under my control. The fact that for once you are going to feel what it's like to be powerless. Mother gasped. "Have you gone insane? This is Christmas." "Yes, it is." I shot back, breathless, a wild light in my eyes. And how fitting, isn't it? Every Christmas I watched this family spoil Evelyn with lavish gifts, while I got next to nothing. Every Christmas I smiled and swallowed the pain. Well, this Christmas the scales finally tipped the other way. For a moment, no one spoke. My father's face was livid, but he had no retort. My mother broke the silence with a strangled sob and clutched his arm. "Richard." "Just give him the keys," she whispered, voice pleading. His jaw worked furiously, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out the fob to Evelyn's convertible. In one harsh motion, he slapped the keys into my palm. "There," he said, almost spitting the word. "Take it, and get the hell off my property." A cold, triumphant calm settled over me. I closed my fingers around the fob, that symbolic scepter of my sister's status now literally in my hand. "Wise decision," I said quietly. Evelyn broke into sobs, covering her face with her hands. My mother stood beside her, arms around her shoulders, shooting me a look of pure heartbreak, as if I were some monster who had torn through her world. My father wouldn't even look at me. His eyes were on the ground, his pride in shambles in front of family and friends. I pocketed the keys and took a step back toward the open door. The winter air was blowing in, cooling the hot flush I felt on my skin. I glanced around at the scene. It was messy and raw, but it was victory. Read the letter for the details. Pay the balance in full within 2 days and you keep the car. Don't, and it's mine. I gave them a thin smile. Merry Christmas. And with that, I turned and walked out into the cold evening, leaving my family in stunned, shattered silence behind me. In the aftermath of that explosive Christmas Eve, a heavy silence fell between my family and me. Heavier than any silence before, because this time it was filled with understanding. We understood one another's positions perfectly now. There were no more pretenses of civility or warmth to hide behind. My parents did not call me on Christmas Day nor the day after. In fact, they haven't spoken to me since. I didn't expect them to. I learned through a mutual acquaintance, word travels fast in their social circle, that my father did indeed try to marshal his lawyers to challenge the loan revocation. But the contract was ironclad. I had made sure of that, and there was little he could do. In the end, he refused to pay the remaining balance out of pride, and so just as promised, the convertible was repossessed by my dealership. On December 26th, A tow truck came and hauled my sister's white luxury car off my parents' driveway. I wasn't there to see it, but I can easily imagine their faces. Helpless, angry, shocked that it was really happening. In one fell swoop, I had taken away the symbol of my sister's untouchable status. I'd like to say that moment brought me pure joy. In some ways it did. I won't lie, knowing that they felt a sting of loss and humiliation was deeply satisfying. I replayed that confrontation in my mind in the days that followed, savoring details like the tremor in Father's hand as he dropped the keys into mine, or the stunned O shape of Evelyn's mouth. It was the justice I'd dreamed of, served cold and undeniable. But if I'm honest, not all of my feelings were celebratory. When the rush of revenge ebbed, I was surprised to feel a pang of sorrow. Not for what I'd done, they earned that, but for the finality of it. Some small part of me had still hoped that maybe someday my family might come around and love me the way I wanted. By taking my revenge, I knew I'd burned that last fragile hope. I had closed the door on any reconciliation, and that was the price I paid for justice. That reality hit me over the following weeks. At first, I was too consumed with the high of what I'd done to care. I poured myself into running my dealership. Business was challenging but fulfilling, and best of all, free from my family's shadow. Within that world, I earned respect on my own terms. I heard a few months later that Father got Evelyn an even more extravagant car to replace the one I took, and they told everyone a tale about a mix-up with the first car's financing, pretending they returned it by choice. I had to laugh. Of course they'd spin the story to save face. I didn't mind. We all knew the truth. I got what I wanted from them. Not their approval, not their love, but something colder, and in some ways more satisfying. I got justice. For once, I was the one in control, and they were at my mercy. And even if they'd never acknowledged that openly, we knew it happened. They will always remember it, especially each Christmas when that story replays in their minds, unbidden. I doubt they'll ever be able to look at a white convertible with a red bow again without thinking of me. As for me, I've made my peace with the outcome. Being disowned officially or not by my family is a small price to pay, considering I was never truly a part of that family to begin with. The weight that I carried for so long, the weight of feeling lesser, of craving validation from people who refused to give it, it's gone. In its place is a clarity and a hard-won self-respect. Ironically, only by abandoning any need for their approval did I finally feel free to define myself. Still, I won't pretend everything is sunshine. Revenge doesn't turn back time or magically heal the old scars. I still have moments late at night when I revisit childhood memories and feel that familiar hollowness. But now I understand that the problem was never me. It was them. Their inability to love me was their failure, not my unworthiness. That realization is perhaps the most valuable thing I earned from this entire saga. In the end, my revenge didn't transform my family into better people, nor did it fix the past. What it did was balance the scales. For one important moment, I was able to flip the narrative and make them feel what I felt. And for me, that was enough to finally close that chapter of my life. Today, I run a modestly successful business of my own. I have a small apartment, a few close friends, and a life built on my own terms. It's quieter and humbler than the one I knew growing up, but it's honest. And it's mine. Sometimes I glance at an old family photo and feel a pang. Not for what I did, but for what I never had. I never had the loving parents or supportive sibling I longed for. Revenge could never give me that. It was never supposed to. But what it did give me was validation proof that I deserved better than what I got. In punishing them, I vindicated myself. That realization has been unexpectedly healing. The boy who was starved of love and fairness is gone. In his place is a man who will never allow himself to be devalued like that again. I paid a price for my vengeance, letting go of the illusion I might ever have a loving family. But I gained something far more valuable: self-respect and the freedom to move forward unburdened. And that is a trade I can live with. I'll admit recording this story and sharing it so openly wasn't easy. Reliving those moments dredged up a lot of emotions. But if my experience reaches even one person out there who feels as unseen and hurt as I once did, and gives them a sense that they're not alone, then it's worth it to me. Sometimes hearing someone else put words to what you're feeling can be the first step toward healing or change. I've laid bare the journey of my silent revenge. Every hurt, every choice, every consequence. Telling this story isn't easy. It forces me to confront the truly darkest and most vulnerable parts of my life. But I hope that in sharing it with all of you, I've conveyed something meaningful about standing up for oneself after a lifetime of being pushed down. Do I believe my revenge was right? In truth, I'm not entirely sure. And hey, maybe you completely disagree with what I did, and that's okay. These topics aren't black and white, and hearing different opinions can be eye-opening. Let's keep the conversation respectful. We may not all see things the same way, but we can learn from each other's perspectives. Who knows, maybe you'll offer an angle I haven't considered. I understand both perspectives. I also want to acknowledge that revenge isn't the path for everyone. Many people find strength in forgiveness, in setting boundaries, or in moving on without fanfare. There's immense courage in those choices as well. In truth, healing and self-respect can take many forms. What worked for me might not be right for you, and that's okay. We each have to find our own way to reclaim our narrative. Whether that means confronting those who hurt us, seeking therapy and personal growth, or simply walking away to build a better life elsewhere. You are allowed to choose peace over confrontation, or vice versa, as long as it empowers you and protects your well-being. Whether you find strength in quietly walking away, or in boldly confronting those who wronged you, remember that you have the right to a life where you are valued. I want to be clear, I'm not encouraging everyone to seek revenge like I did. My story is just that. My story with all its unique circumstances and emotions. Revenge can be a double-edged sword. In my case, it gave me closure and self-respect, but it also meant letting go of my family forever. It's a path you can't easily step back from. For some people, forgiveness or simply moving on might be the better, healthier road. Every situation is different, and every person must decide what healing looks like for them. Now I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you were the overlooked or mistreated one? Did you ever crave justice or revenge? How do you feel about what I did? Would you have done the same or handled it differently? There's no easy answer. And I am genuinely curious about your thoughts and experiences. Feel free to share your perspective or even your own stories in the comments. Let's create a space to talk about these hard feelings. The anger, the hurt, and maybe even the forgiveness or lack of it that comes after. I will be reading and responding where I can to what you share, and I suspect many others listening to this will find comfort or insight in knowing they aren't alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to my story, for giving your time and empathy to walk with me through this journey. If my story resonated with you, even in a small way, I invite you to hit that like button or share this video with someone who might find meaning in it. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel for more stories like this one. Who knows, it might reach another quiet soul out there feeling as I once did, and perhaps give them a bit of courage or comfort. Ultimately, my tale is one of transformation. Painful, imperfect, but empowering. I hope it leaves you with something to think about. I am looking forward to reading your comments and continuing this conversation with all of you. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Remember, sometimes the justice we seek from others becomes the justice we must create for ourselves. And happy holidays, on your terms. Take care.